The leech collector. Imagine standing knee-deep in an icy swamp. The water is freezing. Sharp reefs scrape against your legs. Mosquitoes buzz around your face. And you're waiting to be bitten. Not by one creature, by hundreds. Welcome to the life of a leech collector. For centuries, doctors believed that many illnesses were caused by having too much blood. The solution? Remove it. This practice, known as bloodletting, became one of the most common medical treatments in Europe. Whether someone had a fever, a headache, or even depression, doctors often reached for leeches. That created an enormous demand. Millions of leeches were needed every year. Someone had to collect them. Leech collectors searched marshes, ponds, and slow-moving rivers where the tiny creatures lived. The easiest way to attract them was to use themselves as bait. Collectors rolled up their trousers, or sometimes removed them entirely, and slowly walked through the water. The leeches sensed body heat and movement. Within minutes, they attached themselves to the collector's legs, dozens at a time. The collector then peeled each one off by hand, carefully placing it into jars to sell later. It sounds unpleasant, but that wasn't the worst part. Every bite drew blood. By the end of the day, collectors often stumbled home, weak from blood loss. Their legs became covered with small wounds. Those wounds frequently became infected. Cold water caused numbness. Long hours standing in marshes led to illness. And in many areas, leeches became so scarce that collectors had to travel farther and farther to find enough. Some spent entire days searching, only to return with a handful. Ironically, while doctors used the leeches to heal patients, the people collecting them often damaged their own health in the process. Today, we know bloodletting was rarely helpful, but for centuries, it was considered cutting-edge medicine, and thousands of collectors paid the price. The tenor. For thousands of years, leather was one of humanity's most important materials. But before it became soft, smooth, and expensive, someone had to make it. Those people were called tanners, and they had one of the foulest jobs in history. It all began with dead animals. Fresh hides arrived, still covered in blood, fat, and bits of flesh. Before they could become leather, every scrap of meat had to be scraped away by hand. Then came the next step. The hides were soaked for days in giant pits filled with water mixed with lime. This loosened the hair. Workers then spent hours scraping every hair from every skin. But that wasn't enough. To stop the hides from rotting, they needed tannins. Early tanners discovered that tannins from tree bark worked well, but extracting them took weeks. So many workshops used another method instead: animal brains, rotting fish oil, or fermented dog dung. Yes, dog dung. Workers mixed piles of it into vats and kneaded the hides inside. The enzymes helped soften the leather. Imagine spending every day waist-deep in a mixture of dead animal skin, rotting waste, blood, and chemicals. The smell was so powerful that entire neighborhoods complained. Most medieval cities forced tanneries to operate far outside the city walls. No one wanted to live anywhere near them. Even after work ended, the odor clung to the workers. Their clothes smelled. Their hands smelled. Their homes smelled. Many people refused to sit near them in taverns or churches. The chemicals were just as dangerous. Constant exposure damaged their lungs and burned their skin. Small cuts often became infected. Many workers developed chronic breathing problems long before reaching old age. Yet, without them, armies would have had no leather armor. Travelers would have had no boots. Books couldn't have been bound. Sometimes, history depended on people willing to do absolutely revolting work. The fuller. Imagine buying a brand new shirt today. Now, imagine discovering that before it reached you, someone had cleaned it using buckets of old human urine. As disgusting as that sounds, it was completely normal in ancient Rome. The people responsible were called fullers. Their job was to clean newly woven cloth and prepare expensive garments for wealthy citizens. The problem was, soap hadn't become common yet, so they needed another cleaning chemical. Human urine turned out to be surprisingly effective. As urine breaks down, it produces ammonia. Ammonia is excellent at removing grease and dirt. So Roman cities actually collected urine as a valuable resource. Large jars were placed along busy streets. People walking past simply relieved themselves inside. Once the jars filled up, workers transported the contents to workshops. inside enormous stone tubs. Fullers poured in the urine and added dirty clothing. Then came the strangest part. They climbed into the tubs barefoot and spent hours stomping on the clothes with their feet. Imagine crushing grapes in a vineyard. Now replace the grapes with filthy clothing and replace the grape juice with stale urine. Hour after hour, step after step. That was someone's full-time career. The smell was unbearable. The chemicals irritated their skin. Their feet remained soaked all day, yet the work had to continue. After washing, the clothes were rinsed, scrubbed, hung to dry, then brushed until they looked soft and luxurious. Ironically, the richest Romans proudly wore these expensive garments without thinking much about how they had been cleaned. Even Emperor Vespasian recognized how valuable urine had become. He actually introduced a tax on collecting it. When his son criticized the idea, the emperor supposedly held up a coin and asked whether it smelled. When his son said no, Vespasian replied with a phrase that survives even today. Money doesn't stink. For the people doing the washing, it certainly did. The gong farmer. Despite the funny name, there is nothing funny about being a gong farmer. In medieval England, the word gong didn't refer to a musical instrument. It meant human waste. Before indoor plumbing, nearly every house had a pit underneath the toilet. Over months, or even years, these cesspits slowly filled with sewage. Eventually, someone had to empty them. That someone was the gong farmer. These workers usually began after sunset, not because they preferred working at night, but because nobody wanted to watch them. Armed with wooden shovels and heavy buckets, they climbed directly into enormous pits filled with years of accumulated waste. The smell was almost impossible to describe. Rotting food, human waste, dead rats, and stagnant water all mixed together into a thick sludge. The work was incredibly dangerous. Decomposing waste released gases like methane and hydrogen sulfide. A single deep breath could knock someone unconscious. If that happened inside the pit, there was little chance of escape. Some workers suffocated before anyone realized they were missing. Even if they survived, infections were constant. Tiny cuts on their hands could become life-threatening. Protective gloves didn't exist. Neither did masks. They simply accepted the risk. Surprisingly, gong farmers often earned more money than many ordinary laborers. Why? Because almost nobody else was willing to do the job. It paid well, but the social cost was enormous. People avoided them. Many were forced to live on the edges of towns because of the smell that seemed impossible to wash away. They performed one of the most important jobs in medieval society, yet they were treated as outcasts. And unfortunately, things somehow get even worse.